Greetings and welcome to the Dream Syndicate. In today's video, we're sculpting a Krampus head. Let's get crafting. If you want to join me in making an imaginary reality, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Before we can get into sculpting Krampus's head, first we're going to have to shape a pair of horns. To do this, we're going to take some fine gauge aluminum armature wire and twist it on itself, which is going to give us a form to sculpt the horns clay over top of. I'll be sure to leave a link where you can get the supplies like the ones I'm using. And here we have a pretty good base to make our horns on. We'll soften up a couple of pieces of clay by kneading it thoroughly. And then we'll shape out two oblong forms that will sort of sandwich the wire between those two pieces. Next, we'll take one of our steel sculpting tools and sort of score along the side of this horn length. This is going to let you blend those two pieces of clay together as smoothly as you possibly can. I'll go ahead and form Krampus's other horn right here. I'm liking the shape that we're getting, and we're about ready to add some more details to these horns. I'm taking my clay sculpting tool that sort of looks like a golf club and just creating these straight lines that reinforce the round form of the horn. The shape of these horns are inspired by the way ram's horns look. Unfortunately, the horns were a little too tall for my toaster oven, so they got a little scorched, but we'll paint over it and it should be fine after all. Next, we'll use that staple of art doll crafting, tin foil, and we're going to make a light bulb shaped form that's a little flat, work our clay over top of that, and it'll be the basic shape for Krampus's head. Let's form this long cylinder shape that will be his neck, and blend the head and neck together. For my sketches, I knew that I wanted to give Krampus a heavy brow, so I'm working on adding more volume and mass to that, and I'll be doing that more later on. I'm also going to use my thumbs to create some eye sockets for the character. I've made a couple of kidney-shaped forms that I'm going to use for Krampus's cheeks, so I'm going to smooth those on here. Next, I'm going to start laying in the locations of some of Krampus's features. I'm working on this big open mouth. I'll plot some dots for his eyeball, and then also finally he's going to have a long nose, so we'll put that right there. I want Krampus to have a sort of an exaggerated skull shape to it, so I'm adding some more volume to the cheekbones, so it's almost going to look like the way someone might draw a skull. Now we're going to dig some clay out of Krampus's mouth. He'd have a hard time snarling, growling, or being otherwise auditorily menacing with a mouthful of clay. And we'll have to spend a little bit of time refining the cavity inside our Christmas demon's mouth. Next, we'll put in these really cool animalistic eyes that I came across. I knew that I wanted something kind of yellow or orange and was also kind of unnerving, like a goat's eye or something, but I thought this slit pupil was looking nice and devilish. Here I'm hollowing out around the eye socket. Creatures with hollow eye sockets just look extra good and creepy, so I wanted to get that across. I'll use a pyramid-shaped piece of clay for Krampus's nice long nose. Now I'll just use my clay tool to help blend that down. I found that the nose wasn't long and pointy enough, so I gave him a nose extension. Now 2 balls of clay alongside the central mass of the nose to create nostrils and some holes for Krampus to breathe out of. We'll take some long, thin pieces of clay and use that to shape the lower eyelids of the character. Next, I'm going to use the flat pointy tool and the golf club shaped tool, technical terms I assure you, to help create the contours of the lower eyelid of Krampus. Sometimes you can use a bit too much clay for areas that you intended to be thinner, so you can just slice it away just like I'm doing it and scrape off the excess clay. And now we'll start to give Krampus his upper eyelids here. For me, this is the part where the art doll head really starts to take shape and come alive. And not in the creepy, the Puppet Master movies sort of way, but in the character having a personality of its own. Next, we're going to stretch out some long pieces of clay that we can wrap around Krampus's horns, so this way it'll create the base of them. Once the horn base is blended down, then I'll take my tool and try to flatten out the top of the horn base. Then we'll make the other horn right here. I still want Krampus to have a much heavier brow than I've established already, so I'm going to take this big chunk of clay and blend that down to give him a really heavy set eyebrow. And it looks like we're well on our way to giving Krampus that nice craggy eyebrow. We're just going to smooth over this center part across his nose bridge a little bit and put these furrows here to pronounce the severity of his brow. Next, I'm going to take a length of fine armature wire and give him a snake-like forked tongue. Here I'm making a hole that I'll be able to later epoxy the tongue into. Using some plumber's epoxy, I'm going to be able to make some tiny teeth that I'll later implant into Krampus's mouth. And just look at that smile. Again, we had another instance of the piece being a little too big for my toaster oven, so there's a little bit of warping and bubbling there, so I'm gonna file that off, and once I paint it, you shouldn't even be able to notice it. Next, I'm gonna cut strips of paper tape. I'm gonna put that around that armature that I made that forked tongue with. Once it's covered, I'll saturate it with water and then use some watered down Mod Podge to stick the paper tape to the armature wire. I'm taking my Sharpie and drawing some dots that I'm going to drill into later for Krampus's ears. Then with a fine piece of armature wire, I'm going to create the shape of the ear form. Now we'll just trace the spade shape of the ears onto this light colored cloth here. Then we'll cut the ear shapes out with a pair of fabric scissors. I'll take my fabric tack and attach the fabric that I cut for the ear shape to the frame and tautly pull the piece of fabric and create a little cavity like this. Next, I'm going to use some Mod Podge to stiffen the fabric, and it's also going to help it keep a firm form around the armature. Now we're going to draw a circle with our Sharpie so we can drill to put the wire for Krampus's body through. Mixing up some plumber's epoxy, I'm going to use that to put it inside the holes drilled for the ears, and it'll anchor them in there. And here's what Krampus looks like with his ears installed. The fabric ears look good, but there's still some spots where the wire shows through, so I'm cutting strips of paper tape and patching those spots to give it a more uniform look. To finish this head sculpt off, all I need to do is apply my mixture of water and Mod Podge to firm up the strips of paper tape that I patched on. Keep an eye out for my next video where I paint Krampus's head. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to join me in making the imaginary reality, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Until next time, make believe.